even Planned Parenthood understands that if they are forthright about what abortion is, that it kills a living human being, even if they don't want to say baby. If they said a living human being and here's how it works, that most people, even Nancy Pelosi, would shudder.
I'm so excited about this conversation. I've been thinking about this conversation for days that I get to have with you guys, so thank you for coming. And Lisa Bevere, Allie Stuckey, everyone, a lot of people watching already know who you guys are. Let's do some quick introductions. I'll start with Mama Lisa.
Well, I mean, I'm obviously a mother of 4 boys, and hopefully soon, a grandmother to 9. We're waiting anxiously, and I just love what we get to do, that we get to use our voices to speak truth and love to a generation that has actually kind of lost their way. And so I've had the opportunity to travel and minister as well as write books, and it's an incredible privilege.
I meet so many women that consider you like a mother figure.
I will take that. There's no greater honor. I was shocked when my agent said, your demographic is 24 to 35. And I started crying. I said, wait, that's my children's age. And I thought, there's a whole generation looking for mothers. And their mothers are trying to be their friends instead of them.
How many books now have you written, Lisa?
I don't know. I think 14.
New York Times bestseller, multiple times. Amazing.
Yeah,
You're
I read her books and started in college. Girls with Swords was the first book I read. I think she said that came out in 2014. So I was like a senior in college going through a hard time. And so I can attest to that she is just that perfect balance of fierceness and gentleness. And that's what you're looking for in a mentor.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you, Allie.
And Allie, you're also not a mom, let's say a sister figure to so many women, and your show has been, I think, so groundbreaking to help people understand the crazy times that we are in.
Thank you.
Share more about the podcast, which is at how many millions of downloads now?
Oh, I don't know.
You're at 1,000 episodes.
Yes, a little more than 1,000 episodes. I know, it's crazy. It's been 6.5 years. It started out as a one-time-a-week show, and people always ask me, do you run out of things to talk about? I'm like, no, I run out of time. So now it's 4 times a week. I mean, I could talk like eight times out of the week. I could have more episodes than there are days in the week. But I am a mom, a real life mom to 3 little girls. And I love talking to young women, that demographic, 25 to 45, mostly moms, not all moms, but women trying to make sense of the chaos of our culture. They want clarity. They want courage. Everywhere they look, they see cowardice and confusion, and they're just hungry for, but what is true? Give me some substance. Give me some grounding. Give me something more than this fluff that they even get from a lot of female Christian leaders and Bible study authors that just tell them, you know, your biggest problem is that you have low self-esteem. So today we're going to talk about how beautiful you are. There may be a place for, you know, real confidence boosting in Christ, but that's not the biggest problem that women are facing. They need something more than that. So I hope by the grace of God that I'm helping women navigate the craziness of our world.
You absolutely are. All right, we got to talk about the lies women are facing. That's what we were going to do with this episode, which I'm very excited about, because I think the cultural lies that women are facing are the reason for so much of the pain and the confusion and just the frustration a lot of women are feeling today. And if you're a man, please listen too, because this will help your sisters and your mothers and your wives and everyone else.
Your daughters.
Your daughters, yes, and your daughters. We were sitting down here, though, and the big question we were discussing before this was our color palettes. So we got to just get to the bottom of this. Like, what you got?
Very important.
Who here has got? Did you guys get the colors done yet, or that hasn't
No,
happened?
I've been self-diagnosed.
Okay,
me too.
Okay,
and
social media,
Pinterest.
Yes, but you actually got your colors done before it was even a trendy thing.
I did it 3 years ago.
Okay, so they came to your house and they put the colors and they were like, "See, this is bad. See, this is beautiful." That's what I see on social media.
It's like a magic trick, and it was a girlfriend of mine starting a business, and so I wanted to go and support her business.
Yeah.
And I went to her studio, and she did the drapes. And to be honest, sometimes I didn't fully understand what I was looking at, but I did see that there were some colors that definitely did not look that great, and then there were others like, that works better. But I think we were all talking about we have a suspicion we all might be the same color palette.
Yeah. But as soon as you say publicly, this is what I am, I'm an autumn, you will get a million messages saying, no, you're a summer, you're a spring. Let me tell you, I don't know what I am. I know I'm not a summer. Now, I used to think that light blue was my color. I'm like, oh, I look so good. I saw myself wearing light blue on a camera one day, and I was like, wait, my face disappeared. I just was totally washed out.
This is autumn. This is autumn.
I don't.
And it looks lovely. I love it.
I don't do a good job of wearing the colors that I know look good on me. So I don't know, because you can't wear chocolate brown and olive green all year.
No, it's hard to find. And I wear black, so I stay clean. I mean, it's just basically, it's all matching everything.
Yes.
And it may not be my palette, but it is my go-to.
Here it is.
There's four of them. There's the summer, the autumn, the winter, the spring. This, by the way, I don't think is in my color palette, so people in the comments might be like, this is not your color palette.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know.
It looks good.
I don't know.
It's working.
So along with the confusion about colors today that people have, I like that that's becoming in vogue to do that more, though, because I think there's a lot of beauty in understanding what looks the best on you.
Yeah.
Because you can obviously go to extremes of caring too much or caring too little, but dressing for the body, dressing for the colors, the natural colors we have, I think there's something really lovely about that.
Yeah.
Kind of lost the art of knowing ourselves and dressing well.
Yeah, I think
culture.
so too. I think so too.
So, Lies Women Tell, you just wrote Fight for Female.
Yes.
That just came out.
Yes.
You are about to launch your book, your next book.
Yes, Toxic Empathy, How Progressives Exploit Christian Compassion.
So which lie should we start with, ladies? Because there's a lot of
lies out there. I don't know. Lisa, do you want to go first?
Well, first of all, I'm really excited about your book because I think that is something that happened to a lot of people. They had good intentions and a bad response. And for me, I felt like there was multiple epidemics during COVID. There was COVID, and then there was cowardice that was released, and then confusion and chaos. But for me, I think the thing that is so important, and something you do well, and something you speak out on, I do not believe that we can compromise the image of God. And I believe when we say that women can be men or men can be women, we are undermining the involvement of God in our weaving. I mean, when God says, I weave you with fearful wonder, and then we have a generation that is hearing, no, it was accidental. Oh, no, your gender identity is this, but your physical body is that. They cannot trust. They're thinking, I can't trust God with my formation. How can I trust him with my transformation? And the enemy is going to the very core. And, we're seeing women fighting to be men. I think I heard Erica Commissar say this morning, they're being told, go out there and outman the men. And I think, that's what we have been told by the feminists for a very long time. And so for me, it was important to expose this lie that women acting like men is not our position of strength. We need to be women who act like women. And right now, because women haven't valued that entrustment, men are acting like women.
I think that a lot of that's the confusion of the role of a woman versus the role of a man. And I think there is, the early feminists, there was some very important backlash against this idea that women can't work, women can't vote. There are some things that, women aren't allowed to do. And it's like, we're all humans. We all have the ability to be creative. We all should be involved in civic life. We all should share equal rights under the law. I think that's a little bit different, though, than what we're getting to here, which is what does that look like in relationship with each other? In personal relationships, how do we show up? How does that work? What do you guys think about the role of women? I know it's even controversial to talk about the role. What is different about us as women versus men and how we show up in society?
I've been thinking about this a lot lately when I think about why so many women do support progressive policies. And I think a lot about just the direction that women are going as men are becoming more conservative, women are becoming more progressive. And then at the same time, the marriage rates are going down, the procreation rates are going down. I think all of those things go hand in hand. And as I have little girls and I just see how different they are than my nephews, for my little girls, everything turns into a family. They could have 3 blades of grass and they're like, this is mommy, daddy, baby grass. They'll just do that. Whereas with my nephews, everything becomes a gun. They're so different at such a young age. And I'm like, every woman that you see out there who is proudly marching for abortion, proudly saying, I'm a girl boss, I don't need kids, I don't want a family, I don't need no man, all of those were at one point the little girl who was making little families out of the random objects. I'm speaking generally. I know that there are some exceptions, but all women were born with this instinct to nurture and to nourish and to beautify and to raise. That's why we've got our dolls, our Barbies. That's why we want to play house and family. And that doesn't just go away because the culture changes. And so I've started to think about the fact that really every woman has a baby. It just might not be a human baby. Every woman
They carry something.
Yes, is channeling that nurturing towards something. Maybe it's her career, maybe it's her dog, maybe it's her plants, maybe it's herself, maybe it's money. It could be all different kinds of things. And maybe it's a healthy thing for women who haven't been blessed with children yet. Maybe they're mentoring, helping take care of children who don't have parents. And so it can be healthy or unhealthy, but this misplaced mothering, this gap between what women are made to do, which is mother in some way, biologically or not, and trying to fulfill that instinct with lesser things, I think that's causing a lot of angst, a lot of anger, a lot of confusion, gender confusion, gender role confusion, and doubling down on this anti-natalist, pro-abortion position. I think a lot of it has to do with the seared consciences that come from trying to replace our natural instincts with something a lot less.
Or being told that they're, less than.
Yeah.
Like feeling guilty for
wanting
just
to nurture.
wanting to be a mother. But I even feel like the Bible sets a very clear precedent. When you look at the Proverbs 31:1, she has a family and she has a vineyard and she works. I just don't think you can do it all at the same time. And so you have to know your season of life, and then in that season, you bring forth fruit.
Or you can't do it all alone, right?
You can't do it all. And we're not made to do it
We're not
alone.
made to do it alone. Yeah.
I was allowed to babysit my friend's daughter one time, and I discovered that the way boys are is very different than the way the girls are. My boys, when they built with Legos, they built big.
Yeah.
It was all like, we're going to build a tower, and then we're going to smash it. And the one time I babysat a little girl, she built rooms. And she brought out the people, and she put people down for naps, and she sat them at the table. My boys are like, what are you doing with our
a very
Legos?
familiar scene,
So
yes.
men are really good with structure, and women are really good with nurture. And if you have structure without nurture, you'll build big, but you will not build safe. And if you have nurture without structure, you'll be emotionally hostage to everything that you hear, which is why your book is so important. You'll be like, oh, I need to feel everybody's feels. And so we need the two of that, because John feels things and sees things that I process differently. And so he needs my input, but together we have a better viewpoint. And I went to, I live in Franklin, which is a bubble. You have a small bubble here in California, but I have a big one. And I went to a coffee shop with a T-shirt that said the future is male and female. And people were like, thank you. The men were like, thank you for including us in the future. I'm like, you're welcome. And I had women like, I need that T-shirt. So I thought, okay. So I take a picture with it, and I just put underneath it, the future is male and female, because without male and female, there is no future.
Yeah.
And the backlash that I got.
Even from Christians, right?
Oh, yes. You are co-signing with patriarchy. Jesus would never be okay with the oppression of women. This is coding like all lives matter. You are a demon of hate, transphobe, it went wild.
Wow.
And so I thought, what is behind this? What is behind this? It's an anti-family, anti-male spirit. My grandson came over and I said, Asher, what are your thoughts on the quote, the future is female? He said that I'm unnecessary.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, a 14-year-old boy is being sent the messaging, and yet woman was created as the answer to the man not being alone. And we're supposed to come alongside them and be a power unit, and not this power struggle that we're seeing right now.
There is this pushback that from people who may be listening. Probably not. A lot of the people listening are like, yes, but there's some people that I respect where they're coming from, and they say, well, historically, women have always been subjugated, and there have been a lot of abuses of women, and so the patriarchy is bad because when you have the man in control, it's bad. And I think what is missed here always in these conversations is it's not like a one or the other, where it's like men are fully in control, women are subjugated, or women should be fully in control and then men are subjugated and they're unnecessary. But God created Adam and then he created Eve, and he gave them both the mandate to go and have dominion over the earth and to be fruitful together. They couldn't be fruitful on their own. They had to do it together and to be fruitful together. Allie, what is your take on these? You shared something really beautifully earlier, but on what it looks like to have to submit. Let's just talk about submission for a minute. What submission looks like from your Christian perspective.
Yeah.
And you're obviously a powerhouse woman. You have a show. You speak to millions of people. You influence millions of people. You don't look like you're just like, hiding in the shadows, letting the men do all the work. You've also gotten some heat for even doing that from certain, sects within Christianity, but most people are very supportive. What's your take on all that?
Yeah, gosh. Well, I think just one thing about patriarchy seems kind of inescapable, because even as the feminists are roaring that, we're going to be in charge because men have been so bad, they're the same ones that are saying, well, a man can become a woman and enter our spaces. And so the men are still in charge. Now they're saying that they can be better women than women can
also,
actually be.
The men should get drafted and not the women. Yeah. And so only the men should fight the war. And there's sort of like the patriarchy within the military. There are some roles that are better for men.
That's true.
Depending on what it is. So
yes, there's a lot of inconsistency and just duplicitousness when it comes to feminist ideology. But when it comes to submission in marriage, because, we've heard feminists for a very long time say that Paul was a misogynist and that Ephesians 5 was speaking out of just, a hatred for women. But I love when I'm reminded of, and I certainly didn't come to this revelation on my own. I don't remember where I originally read it, but in Ephesians 5, when he is saying, wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that the radical command in that section was not the command to the wives to submit to their husbands, because they did live in a patriarchy in the ancient Roman Empire and in the Middle East, and so that was normal. What was radical and revolutionary at the time was telling husbands to love your wives, to cherish them, to care about their holiness and their sanctification, to lay down your life on their behalf. That was the radical aspect of the gospel. Not only this Hebrew idea of the imago Dei that says we're all made in God's image and therefore equal in value, but the radical gospel, which says you are equally dead in sin apart from Christ and can be made alive in Christ. That was an amazing message that changed not only how the world saw people and children, but how marriages were formed. And so, yes, there is a submission that we should be gladly doing to our husbands. That isn't always easy, which goes back to the garden. But at the end of the day, and you say this so well, and I can't wait for you to share your perspective on this. So I hope I'm not
married for 40 years.
I know. I hope I'm not taking away what she's going to say, but. When women try to be in charge, to be the final decision makers,
in the household, you're talking.
Yes, in the household, to be the one that said, no, we're going to this church, we're doing this thing, this is the education, whatever it is, it becomes a burden. You feel the tension that this isn't right. This is a manifestation of the curse that our desire will be for a husband, but it's not, this doesn't feel good. And yet when a man takes charge, it feels like the things are falling into place. Now, as you know, I have lots of opinions. My husband values.
I think all three of us do.
Yes, my husband values my opinion and my wisdom very much. I've never felt disrespected. I've never felt that he's like, you know what, you just need to be quiet. I got this. But when it comes to the decisions for our family, if we're at an impasse or if I just don't know, he's the one. He tells us, where we're going to move, what church we're going to go to. Ultimately, even though we're coming to these decisions together, the education for our children, the finances for our household, even my work, even though he's never, directed me, you can or can't say this. But at the end of the day, we are in this together, and I trust his direction. If he says, you know what, it's really not best for our family for you to do this or whatever it is. So that's what it looks like for us, is that he is the ultimate guide and decision maker for our family, even though the vast majority of what we're doing is very collaborative because that's just life. Yeah. So yeah, that's what it looks like for us. But I can't wait to hear from Lisa.
Lisa, how many years married?
42.
Tell us.
We're just a little behind her.
Tell us a wise one. Tell us your.
Well,
you have wrestled and
the first 4 years of my marriage was me struggling, me wrestling, me thinking submission meant if I agree with you, then I do it, and if not, I fight you tooth and nail. And I remember I was working full-time. John was working part-time. I'd had my first child, my first son, and I am so stressed out. And I was in the shower trying to get my shoulders to come down because I'm like this. And I heard the Holy Spirit say, "You don't think John's a good head of the household, do you?" And I thought, no, I know he's not. He said, "You think you can do it better?" Because I had tried to control everything because of fear, but not just fear, unbelief. See, I believed that God was good for everybody else's marriage, but my parents had gotten divorced twice. I believed that God might work through other people's lives. If you came, I would have prayed for you, but maybe not for mine. And so he was like, he said, "Okay, so," he said, "I've made you the head of the household." And even when I heard him say that, I thought, well, that's not scriptural. That's not scriptural. And he said, "It's a yoke to you, but it's a mantle to John. Throw it off." And I started to think, if I throw it off, the garbage isn't going to go out. The children, like Addison's never going to get to child care. I can't do this. I can't do this. And I said, I don't know if I trust John. And God said, you don't have to trust John. You just have to trust me.
Wow.
And I saw all of these replays of all the demeaning, disrespectful conversations, the way I'd acted towards my husband, thinking, I needed to prove myself smarter, prove myself stronger. And what it did is he pulled away. And I just remember breaking in the shower and weeping. And I came out of the shower and I looked at my husband and I said, I will quit my job tomorrow. I want to be one with you. I don't care if we live, in a trailer somewhere. I don't care. I just want our love back. I want to be one with you. And John looked at me and he said, I don't think you need to quit your job, but I do think you need to quit thinking you're the source. And he said, there's a big difference between you can be a stay-at-home mom and think you're the source and you'll be stressed out. Or you can be a stay-at-home mom and not God's your source. You can work full-time, no God's your source. And so that was a shifting. And I watched my husband go from a boy to a man when I stopped being his mother and I started to be his wife. And a wife is a very different position. I'd never known. All my husband had known was his mother. And I had to start saying things like, I believe you'll make the right decision. And then in my head, he's like, he's not going to do it right. It's going to be a disaster. But I had to relinquish control. And I watched my husband grow. And people are like, what? Like John was ever shrinking? He didn't have the confidence. And part of it was I did not do that with him. And I love that the clarity is submission to our own husbands, not submission to every single man. So we submit to people we're on mission with. So if you're an employer, your people that work with you, they're under assignment with you. And so, but what is the reason for authority? It's not to dominate. It's to provide provision, direction, and protection. And so why wouldn't I let my husband do that for me? And why wouldn't I want to do that for my children? And so children submit to their parents because that's what their parents should in a healthy, godly family do.
I have to ask this because I'm sure some people may think this, and maybe they heard what you said, Allie, and they're like, well, you've got a great husband, Allie. You've got a great husband. And maybe they're in a situation where they're doubting their husband, doubting his abilities. And I'm not talking about abuse because that's another, I think, big wound for a lot of people. We're not talking about abuse. We're talking about disagreements, people thinking that they're not, rising to the occasion, their spouse, or they're not even married yet, but they're afraid what it's going to look like. And they're afraid even agreeing to marry a guy because they don't want to be in the position of that kind of reliance, that kind of dependency. The person listening might be saying, well, I like what you're saying in theory, but you don't know my husband. And it's not abuse that's the issue. It's just he's not up to the task of what the level of spiritual leadership I'm looking for or mission leadership. What would be your take on that, Lisa?
Well, first and foremost, you're not in control. You might think you're in control, but control is an illusion. And so when we become followers of Christ, we submit to Christ. And if Christ has an order for the household, then we need to trust that if we honor his order, he will put things in order. But yeah, I do think people quit way too easy on their marriages. I think we forget that marriage is a covenant, and it is something that isn't to enlarge both people's lives. So yeah, I mean, I would have said the same thing the first 4 years of my marriage. And now, and this is something I want every person to understand, you can either tear down your marriage or you can build it. Proverbs 14:1 says, a wise woman builds her house, but a foolish woman with her own hands tears it down. So what does that even mean? When we try to build something in our own strength and not according to God's standards or God's way, we're trying to build in our own strength, we end up tearing down what we're actually hoping to build. And so again, I think a lot of times husbands in white, they talk to each other as though they're enemies when they're allies. And so I had to change the way I looked at my husband, change the way I talked to my husband. And he was always kinder to me than I was to him because he didn't come from crazy people, but I did. So it was a very different dynamic. And I do believe that you can ask God to get involved. You can't change your husband. You can't, but you can change your response and you can ask God to get involved.
I want to stay on this more because I think this is such a hot button issue for so many women, is our relationships and how we have relationships and how we relate to men. And I love what you're saying because submission is, in the right context, is this beautiful thing. I do want to touch on this one where we're kind of already, but the abuse question.
Yeah.
Because I think this is the thing that, it's sort of like when it comes to abortion, people in their minds say, oh, there's these exceptions, and so we have to be okay with abortion. Now, that's not a great analogy because if there is an abuse in a marriage, I believe, you do need to protect yourself, and that's actually honoring of yourself, especially if there's kids involved. But I do think there's a lot of confusion about what even abuse means. I would love to just to hear your guys' take on that.
Yeah. I think abuse, like a lot of words, toxic, other terms that have kind of grown and been exaggerated. I think abuse has, unfortunately, for victims of true abuse, kind of been watered down because it's taken to mean when someone is mean to me, when they're disagreeing with me, if I feel like someone is holding me back, that's abusive, that's trauma, that's toxic. And I think that does a real disservice to those who have really been victims of abuse. And I think that we need to evaluate what are we looking for when we're talking about justifications for divorce? Are you really looking to stay married and honor God, or are you looking for unjustified reasons to dissolve your marriage simply because you want to? Because nowadays there's so much psychobabble that you can use as real, even medical justifications for doing whatever you want to do, whether it's abortion or whether it's changing genders or whether it's divorce, whether it's walking away from your family. It's good for your mental health. It's good for your emotional stability. It's good for your self-love. These are all just kind of like trendy narcissistic terms to justify just doing what you want to do. But then when it comes to real abuse, when it comes to actual abuse, which I don't really think there's a lot of debate at the end of the day and what real abuse is and what just like disagreement and he's not being very nice to me is. For real abuse, I do think it is the responsibility of the victim to walk away. And you can hope for healing for that person. You can hope for repentance for that person, but you don't need to stay and continue to put yourself, your children in danger. And unfortunately, I'm not sure that everyone in the church has done a great job of drawing those lines, of telling a woman, you need to find refuge. We will be your refuge. We won't be the refuge and the cover for abusers. We will be the refuge and the cover for the abused. Unfortunately, sometimes it's been the opposite. And women have felt, you know, I have nowhere to go. Maybe it is my fault. Maybe I should just stick around and let him beat me and let myself and my children be harmed because I'm a good wife and I can stay in this. And that is absolutely, I don't believe, glorifying to God at all. And so that's what I would say. There should be no equivocation on that at all. I think the first order of business is for a woman to get safety in that situation.
Yeah. Well, and I loved what you said. Like, we as the church need to come around those that are at risk, not perpetuate maybe a appearance that everything is okay when it's not.
Yeah.
I remember actually one of the churches I was at, a woman came up to me and she told me her husband had thrown her down the stairs in front of her kids.
Wow.
And I said, you need to tell the pastor. And she said, well, I didn't get to meet with him, but I did meet with the women, like his wife. And she told me it's because I wasn't submissive enough. And I was like, I said, you need to be safe.
Yeah.
You need to be safe. I said, even if you said, or they would
So nothing
never
justifies.
merit that. That would never be okay.
It doesn't matter what you said.
I don't care if you cussed. I mean, nobody gets the right to throw you down the stairs. And I do feel like that's been the ungodly, unhealthy perspective or the narrative or the lie that's being told, like Christian women have no choice. They are they're abuse victims. They're this, they're that. You're stuck. When I've read so many studies that even when people are in a rough season in their marriage, if they say we're committed, that 5 years later they found out they had a better marriage. And John and I can go back to our hardest seasons in our marriage and realize those were the seasons we both grew the most. But we also leaned into God and stopped attacking one another.
Yeah.
And again, that's not what people want to hear. I mean, you mentioned it's like we have dishonored real abuse. And almost everybody's like, well, my husband's toxic or he's a narcissist. And that word gets used way too frequently.
Right.
There's not that many narcissists.
True, narcissist.
Do you think a lot of the reasons there's so much confusion is because it's just like podcasts now? I mean, people have social media, they have their podcasts, they have YouTube, but we don't have a lot of these deep mentorship relationships with people that really have the wisdom to help us make discerning choices when we're dealing with tough stuff.
I think that's a really good point, that when so many people's livelihood is dependent upon making new content, you are almost incentivized to say what's going to get the most traction. I mean, some people, if you're in it for the wrong reasons and you don't necessarily believe substantively in what you're saying, that we do see a lot of like social media psychologists basically diagnosing people and diagnosing their partners with being toxic and narcissistic. And something can be wrong and sinful without being abusive and traumatic. So for example, like, no, you and your spouse shouldn't be yelling at each other. You shouldn't be demeaning to each other. That's something to address. But does that mean that your husband is, a diagnosed narcissist who is emotionally abusing you?
Right.
Probably not. Maybe in some cases, but not in every case. Not in as many as we were seeing. I think social media and a lack of the relationships between older women and younger women in the church absolutely play a role in that.
You wrote a book on that, Lisa, didn't you?
That's the key. I think that is the key. The Bible says the older women must. It doesn't say if they feel like it or feel called. Teach and train the younger women. And we've had a breakdown between the generations where they have not taught and trained. And so we've become a generation where we are training our husbands instead of our children. We instead of loving and respecting our husbands,
that is good.
We are loving and respecting our children and trying to train our husbands. And so everything is upside down. And then we have these children that run the household.
Yeah.
And it's all upside down. I don't know if you guys both know this, but when I married John, he had an addiction to pornography. And he thought getting married was going to fix it.
Did you know that when you married him?
Absolutely not. No, I had absolutely no idea. And I'd had a promiscuous past, and then he was, involved in pornography and masturbation, all that comes together with that. And I think I discovered it 2-3 years into our marriage. And I would say I did not handle it well. I said, that's your problem. I would say, even because of my own shame, because every woman's like, why am I not enough? What did I do? But I also, because I had a past, thought, well, why did I think I deserved better? Why would I think? And I remember coming to this place where my husband fasted, prayed, and came to the place where he was like, I want to be free, not because this will keep me out of the ministry, but because it is becoming a breach between God and I. Like, I am living in a shadow realm. And, there's a lot of people that don't understand, but it brings shame, it brings shadow. And so when I talk to young couples that are wrestling with this now, I tell them, I wish I would have understood that his problem became my problem because it did enter our marriage. And it wasn't that I caused it, but I could have been more part of the healing.
How so? Because I think some women I've talked to feel deeply wounded by their partner's porn use. And increasingly there's women who are using pornography too. It's everywhere. This is one of the lies that we believe in the culture is like porn is not a big deal. That's one of the big lies. And if you watch porn together as a husband and wife. That's being sold as a thing.
No, I know it.
But how do you define the extremes? Because I have heard the extreme of like an unrepentant porn user who's just doing it again and again. And he's kind of it's like almost blaming the wife. There's some really dark stuff that can happen there.
Yeah, no. Well, and that wasn't my husband. I mean, he like, I don't even remember how, I mean, I have 42 years. And it actually just feels like somebody else's story for me now. There's no emotional attachment to it. But when we talk to other couples, so first of all, I wish I would have been more affectionate. I wish I would have, I mean, and when I'm saying affectionate, not necessarily sexual, I'm just saying affectionate. I wish I would have said, we're going to get through this. Instead of saying, you get through this. I'm pushing you away. I can't believe you've done this. I wish I would have said, I believe this is an attack against our marriage. Not just, this is an attack against me. Where I wasn't the focus, where I wasn't, I wish I would have known that pornography is coming after both the male and the female. And the beautiful union that it used to not be called sex. It used to be called making love. And so now
the marital embrace. It was about marriage.
Yes. And so now, of course, the enemy is undermining the beauty of all that. And then my husband, he started talking openly about it on the stage. And I remember the first time, Allie, I had no idea. He gave me no warning. I'm sitting there with my boys, and they're like, what's that? I'm like, oh gosh, what's that? But he brought all of this into our world and said, I want you guys to be skillful with your sexuality. There is something that wants to take away your strength and take away your future intimacy. And you being selfish with your sexuality now will actually go into your marriage. And I don't want that for you. And so again, I wish I would have been more loving without being compromising. And I think that's kind of that.
How do you do that? I think that's like part of the.
Well, I just wish I would have said those things. I mean, the truth is, I shamed him. I did not say, okay, when I sin, and I say, Jesus, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He's never said, well, you're just going to do it again next week. I always have this sense that I do not condemn you. Go and sin no more. There's always that vote of confidence of better things in my future instead of, well, you've done this before and you're going to do it again and you never change. And those were the kind of things that I said. I did not say, I forgive you. I did not say, I believe better things in your future. I did not, and again, of course, it's way more complicated than we can do on a conversation, but we have an app filled with discipleship resources. And guess what the number one thing that is searched? How to get free from porn.
And you have that as a resource.
It's called Messenger X. Yeah, it's just a free.
It is so complicated, this topic, and important. And I think we don't talk about it a lot because it is so complicated.
And we have Joshua Broom on it. And we have all sorts of other people.
But what would you say to women, and Allie, what would you say to women who are in the dating space or they're not even married yet, but they find out that the person that they're with is looking at pornography? And this is also connected to chastity, which I think is another lie people believe today is we get in bed, of course you should sexually experiment before marriage, find out if you're compatible. But how would you recommend we as women especially, and men, but how do we navigate that?
I think, and y'all can tell me what you think about this, but if you're dating someone and you find out that they are looking at porn, I think that's a reason to break up.
I would agree.
I just do. Now, it's a little more complicated if this person is your fiance maybe, or certainly if you're married. But if you are just dating this person, maybe you're not breaking up forever, or maybe you are, but you don't want to go into marriage knowing that this person has an addiction to pornography or thinks this is okay. Now, praise God if that person then has that breakup as a wake-up call, repents, and maybe God will bring you back together, maybe not. But don't make excuses for it. Don't make yourself think, you know what, this is going to go away once we get married.
Yeah,
they're going to stop once we have kids. This is going to stop. That's, I think, what Satan wants us to think about our addictions and our sins, and it's just not true. Or you might think, I've heard women say this, that this is used as a manipulation tactic sometimes by men to say, well, if we had sex before marriage, then I wouldn't have to look at pornography. And understand that that is a manipulation tactic, that it has nothing to do with that at all, has nothing to do with you. This is a matter of self-control, which is a fruit of the Spirit, which male and female, we both have to exercise self-control in a variety of ways. But I would say, do not marry someone that you see doesn't have self-control. It is one of the greatest fruit of the Spirit that you want to see in a prospective spouse.
I would 100% agree with that. And the Bible's very clear. It says, do not arouse or awaken love before it's time. Because when it's awakened before it's time, it awakens as lust. It doesn't awaken as love. And we're supposed to awaken that love, that intimacy together, not separately, and then come together. And so I think so many people are robbing themselves of a beautiful intimacy. And that's how we're supposed to do it.
We could go on for hours because there's so many more things to talk about. And I know we've got just a couple more minutes. I know folks listening have so much respect for you both. I do want to just ask this one more question because people listening, stuff on sex is so important, relationships, obviously life. Many people are confused about how to, right now, the top issue in this election cycle in many ways is abortion. It's talked about everywhere. You address this in Toxic Empathy and you address this in Fight for Female. Yes. What would be your best advice for someone listening for how to talk about life, abortion, amidst all the lies that are being told? What have you found the most effective?
Well, I think live action, and you do the best job of equipping people with conversation points. But being combative is not an answer. We need to hear people, and then we need to speak the truth. But I do feel like so many people have been inundated with narratives that are lies, like, oh, it's all what raped 11-year-olds. We need to not force them to give birth. When you and I both know that having an abortion doesn't unrape the 11-year-old, and it punishes somebody that wasn't a criminal. So I think having conversations and then you creating the ability for people to have a window into the womb to understand what abortion actually really is, and then the lie that your children are going to ruin your life. I had someone just this weekend say, I don't want to have children, it's going to ruin my marriage. I don't want to have children, it's going to ruin my sex life. I don't want to have, and I'm thinking, I said, my children have done nothing but enhance my life. They have grown me. They have given my husband and I legacy and purpose. They have awakened love in me in ways that I could never even imagine. Children, they're not just mine. They're God's inheritance, like arrows in the hands of a warrior. Our children born in our youth. I have one regret. I have 4 boys. I wish I would have had 8. I wish I could have had more.
4 girls.
Yeah. No, I love being a mother. It's the favorite thing I've ever done. More than being a speaker, more than being a New York Times whatever author. That doesn't mean anything. Nobody comes to your house. Those people aren't going to be there if I'm sick. The people that I love are the people that are in my legacy of life.
You do this so well in Toxic Empathy, what Lisa's saying, showing how it's actually this idea to be empathetic, to let women have abortions, this idea to be empathetic. Oh, you tearing children, it's too much of a burden. What is your take on that, Allie?
Well, I agree about live action, just doing the work that needs to be done, because even in my own personal conversations and on my show, I think the thing that changes the minds most is telling people what happens in an abortion.
Yes.
Because a lot of people don't know, I mean, y'all know better than most people that the abortion lobby uses euphemisms, which is, I think, a sign of toxic empathy, the use of euphemisms to obscure reality, to make people think it's healthcare, even it's miscarriage care, it's autonomy, it's personal choice. They'll even say the contents of pregnancy or the termination of pregnancy. And that means something. That means that even Planned Parenthood understands that the law of God is written on the human heart, and that if they are forthright about what abortion is, that it kills a living human being, even if they don't want to say baby. If they said a living human being and here's how it works, that most people, even Nancy Pelosi, would shudder. And they know that. And that is why Satan disguises himself as an angel of light, and Planned Parenthood and the abortion lobby do the same, because they understand that most people don't believe in killing children. And so once you take that all away and say, let's just use plain language. Y'all like science? Here we go. And just explain what an abortion is. Most people say, okay, I can't get on board with that. Yeah. And that's why it is so important what Lila does and why millions of minds have been changed through that.
Yeah. Thank you both for being truth tellers.
Absolutely.
It's such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful work that you both do. Where can people find your new books?
Amazon.
Fight for Female.
The Fight for Female is on Amazon. It's free shipping, and Toxic Empathy coming out.
We don't love Amazon, but if there's a redemptive way to use it, they take most of the books, and so it's easiest to order from them. Yes. So Toxic Empathy, Fight for Female, you can both find them there, or really anywhere books are sold.
Thank you, ladies.
Absolutely.
Keep it up.
Thank you.